She buried her father on Tuesday. By Wednesday, her husband handed her divorce papers. By Friday, he had a new wife. And while she stood at that graveside, 6 months pregnant, sobbing in the rain, he stood just 3 feet away, holding his own umbrella. He never once moved to cover her. He checked his phone twice during the funeral. He left the reception to take another woman to dinner the same night they put her father in the ground. He thought he was walking away from a grieving woman with nothing. What he didn't know, the quiet janitor who raised her, the man who mopped floors for 35 years, slept on a couch so his daughter could have a bedroom, he was worth $5.2 billion, and every single cent was already in her name. Her husband didn't leave a broken woman. He left the most powerful person in the room. And the moment he walked into that gala surrounded by cameras, donors, and 200 witnesses, he finally understood the catastrophic mistake he had made. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who has nothing left to prove. This story will remind you, real wealth is never the loudest thing in the room. If you've ever been underestimated for being quiet, this one is for you. Hit subscribe because we tell stories here that don't just entertain. They change the way you see the world.
Where the machines were breathing for him, because his own body could not. Maya placed her hand on the cold metal of the hospital bed. Her knuckles turned white as she listened to the unnatural, mechanical rhythm. There was the hiss of the ventilator and the steady beep of the monitor. The overhead lights buzzed with a dull, indifferent sound. She watched her father's chest rise and fall. But it was not his own strength. "Daddy," she whispered, leaning down so close she could smell the antiseptic on his skin. "I just need you to fight for me one more time." His hand felt warm in hers, still rough from a lifetime of work. It was a hand strong enough to hold on, but not strong enough to wake from this. The doctors used soft words, like declining and unresponsive. The language was too gentle for the harsh truth of it all. Her father was dying, and no careful words could change that. She had been in that room for 48 hours straight. She had not slept or eaten, surviving on coffee that tasted like regret and an aching back from the waiting room chair. Her husband, Marcus, had sent 2 texts. One asked if she needed anything. The other said he would be late. She did not answer either one. Outside the hospital, the city was alive. Cars honked and people laughed. The world moved on, completely unaware that hers was falling apart. But inside that sterile room, time had slowed to a crawl. It felt heavy and suffocating, as if gravity itself was pressing down, testing to see how much she could take before she shattered. Her father had raised her, all on his own. He never asked for help or complained. He just gave her a steady, quiet love that was always there. When she was 7, he taught her how to tie her shoes. When she was 12, he showed her how to change a tire. When she was 16, he taught her that the loudest people often have the least to say. And when she was 23 and told him she was getting married, he did not give his approval right away. He simply watched Marcus from across the dinner table. He asked questions that felt a little too sharp back then. Afterward, he gave her a hug and said, "I trust you to know what is in your own heart." He did not say, "I trust him." He said, "I trust you." She had not understood the difference at the time, but it was becoming painfully clear now. A nurse came into the room, moving quietly as she checked the monitors and adjusted the tubes. She avoided looking at Maya. She had seen this kind of scene too many times and knew how it would end. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. Then she saw her father's fingers move. She sat up straight, her heart racing in her chest. "Dad?" His lips moved, but no sound came out. She leaned in closer, desperate to hear anything. He finally spoke 3 words, each one slow and difficult. "Go to bank." And then the monitors began to scream. Nurses rushed into the room, gently guiding Maya into the hallway. She could only stand and wait for them to confirm what she already knew. Her father was gone, and she had no idea what his final words meant. Growing up, Maya assumed that all fathers worked two jobs. Hers certainly did. She remembered him coming home from a long day, looking tired, but always having a smile for her. She thought every dad knew how to fix a leaky faucet and could tell the best bedtime stories. Hers could. During the day, he was a janitor at the local elementary school. At night, he did maintenance at the church 3 times a week. His weekends were spent helping neighbors with repairs they could not afford. They would pay him with home-cooked meals, deep thanks, and true respect. He never seemed tired or upset. He simply worked, came home, made dinner, and asked about her day like it was the most important thing in the world. They lived in a small one-bedroom apartment. She had the bedroom. He slept on the couch for 16 years, and not once did he ever make her feel like it was a sacrifice. They did not have a lot of things, but everything they did own was kept clean, organized, and cared for. Her father would fold his work uniforms with the same care that other men gave to their expensive suits. He polished his work boots every Sunday night. The calendar on their fridge had all her school events circled in bright red. He never missed a single one. Other children had parents who showed up in business clothes, wearing fancy watches and driving new cars. Her father would arrive in his janitor's uniform with the faint smell of floor cleaner on him, and he would sit in the back row to avoid embarrassing her. But she was never embarrassed, not for a single moment. Because while the other parents checked their phones during school plays, her father watched her as if she was the only person in the room. He taught her things that seemed odd for a janitor to know. He showed her how to read a contract and find the hidden clauses. He taught her how to know if someone was lying by watching their hands instead of their eyes. He explained how to walk into a room and know who held the real power versus who was just faking it. "Money talks, baby girl," he used to tell her while they washed dishes. But character whispers. And the people who are worth your time are the ones who know how to listen for that whisper. She did not understand most of his lessons back then, but she never forgot them. When she got her acceptance letter for college, he cried. They were not sad tears, but tears of pure pride that made his whole face soften with joy. "You are going to do things I was never able to do," he told her. "You did everything," she replied. He just shook his head. "No, I chose to do something different. There is a distinction." She did not ask him what he meant by that. Now she wished she had, because looking back, she could see all the small moments that never really made sense. The way he talked, the kinds of books he read, the fact that the bank tellers all knew him by name without an introduction. Her father was not just a janitor. He was a janitor for a very specific reason, and she was about to find out why. It was raining on the day they buried him. It was not the gentle kind of rain that feels sad. It was the harsh kind, the kind that soaks through your coat and turns the ground to mud. It makes you feel like the sky itself is angry. Maya stood at the graveside, 6 months pregnant. Marcus stood beside her, holding his own umbrella. She noticed that immediately. Not because she wanted a romantic gesture, but because when a gust of wind blew rain into her face, he did not move. He did not try to protect her. He just stayed dry, looking down at his phone. One by one, people came to her to offer a hug. They said things that were supposed to be comforting, but they were not. He is in a better place. At least he is no longer in pain. God needed another angel. She just nodded and thanked them. She let them think their words were helping. But what she really wanted to scream was, "He is not in a better place. The better place was here with me. He should have been here to see me become a mother, to meet his grandchild." Marcus checked his watch twice during the funeral. When the pastor invited people to share memories, Marcus was silent. Maya spoke about her father's hands, how they were never still, always fixing something, always building, always steady when hers were shaking. Her voice cracked in the middle of her speech, and she had to stop. Marcus did not reach out to comfort her. When the casket was lowered into the ground, she stepped forward to place a rose on top. Her heels sank right into the wet mud. Her knees almost buckled. An older woman from church quickly grabbed her elbow, steadying her with a soft whisper. "I have got you, honey." Marcus never even noticed. Later, everyone went to the church for food. They served sandwiches that nobody wanted. Her coffee had gone cold in its flimsy paper cup. Voices around her felt too loud for such a somber day. A drained Maya found a quiet corner and sat, softly rubbing her belly. The baby was kicking more than usual, as if it already knew something was terribly wrong. It took Marcus 20 minutes to find her. He did not ask, he just announced, "I need to head out for a bit." Confused, she looked up. "Now?" she asked. "Yeah, that work thing I mentioned last week," he replied. She had no memory of it. Maybe grief had wiped it clean. It did not matter. "Okay," she whispered. He gave her a quick, empty kiss on her head. "I will see you tonight," he promised, but he never came home. By 10 that night, she was still alone in their apartment, in the same funeral clothes, staring at her phone. There were no texts, no calls, and no explanation. Only silence and a chilling realization washed over her. She had just buried the only man who was ever truly there for her. Her husband, she now realized, had checked out of their marriage long before the funeral. She simply was not ready to face it until this very moment. The final confirmation did not come from him, a conversation, or a rumor. It came from a tagged photo on Instagram. It was nearly midnight when she peeled herself off the couch. She changed from her funeral dress, washed the day from her face, and climbed into bed. Her entire body ached with sadness, but her mind refused to shut down. Out of pure habit, she opened her phone and started scrolling, desperate for any escape from two crushing realities. Her father was gone, and her husband was not home, and that is when she saw it. A photo of Marcus, sitting in a restaurant she knew. An expensive place with low lights and candles on the table. He was across from a woman she would never seen before. This was not a coworker or a client. She was young and perfectly put together, the kind of pretty that takes serious time and money. She leaned in close, laughing at something he had said. He was kicked back in his chair, looking relaxed and smiling in a way Maya had not seen in months. The caption read, "New Beginnings," with emojis of clinking glasses and sparkles. It was posted just 1 hour ago. Maya stared at the picture until her eyes went fuzzy. The tears did not come right away. She just sat there, feeling her heart pound in her throat. Her father had been buried less than 12 hours ago, and here was her husband celebrating a new start. She tapped the woman's profile, Isabel Chun, a marketing executive with 73,000 followers. Every photo was an ad for a perfect life Maya would never have. Maya started scrolling through Marcus's activity. She saw a trail of likes on Isabel's posts going back 3 whole months, with comments that were much too friendly. A clear pattern she had either been too trusting or just too tired to notice before. Her hands started to shake, not from sadness, but with something sharper. It was a feeling like her body was finally accepting the betrayal her mind tried to ignore. She pushed herself up, walked to the bathroom, and gripped the sides of the sink, staring at her own face. Pregnant, worn out, completely alone, and married to a man who could not even wait one single day after her father's funeral to take another woman out. She did not break anything. She did not scream, and she did not call him. She just stood there, taking slow, deep breaths, feeling the baby move inside her. After a minute, she went back to bed, put her phone on the nightstand, and decided to wait. Marcus finally got home at 2:14 in the morning. She heard the front door click open, the sound of his keys hitting the counter and his footsteps down the hall. He never even peeked in on her. He went straight to the guest room. In that single moment, Maya knew their marriage was finished. What she did not know was how much worse it was all about to get. He waited until morning to talk, not because he was thoughtful, but because cowards like to do their terrible work in the daylight. Maya was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee she had no plans to drink when Marcus walked in. He looked rested, freshly showered, and composed, like he had rehearsed this moment. "We need to talk," he said. She gave no response, just watched him, waiting for the words she knew were coming. He sat down at the table across from her and folded his hands as if this was just a business meeting. "I think we both know this is not working," he started. Her stomach dropped, but she kept her face perfectly blank. "I have been unhappy for a while, and I believe you have been too. We just did not want to admit it." A bitter laugh almost escaped her. "We." As if this was a mutual decision. As if she was the one who had been so distant. "I want a divorce," he said. The words were cold and final. There was no doubt, no trace of regret. She felt the baby give a sudden kick, as if even it could feel that something was deeply wrong. "You are serious," she said, her voice quiet. "I am. My father died 2 days ago. I know. I'm sorry about that. But his passing does not change where we are. As if their marriage was just some location they had ended up in by accident. I will support the baby," he continued, his tone like he was closing a deal. "Financially, I will not abandon that responsibility. But as for you and me, we are done. I have met someone. It was over." She looked at him, truly looking at him for the first time. This was the man she had trusted, the man she had picked, the man who promised her forever in front of all their friends and family. And now he was sitting right there, perfectly calm, tearing her life apart like it was a pile of documents. "I have already talked to a lawyer," he added. "I will have all the papers drawn up by the end of the week. You will not have to do much. Just sign. Just sign," she repeated, her voice empty. "Yeah, I am trying to make this as painless as possible for you. Painless." She had the urge to scream, to throw something at his head. She wanted to demand how he could do this to her right now, like this, without a single shred of guilt. But she stopped herself, because a piece of advice her father always gave her suddenly played in her mind. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Marcus had just shown her exactly who he was, and she believed him. "Okay," she said. He blinked, obviously surprised. It seemed he had prepared for a fight. "Okay? Yes. If that is what you want, then okay." He stood up, looking incredibly relieved. "I really think this is the best decision for both of us." She said nothing. He turned and walked out of the room, then out of the apartment, leaving her there, 6 months pregnant and completely alone. It was in that moment she recalled her father's very last words to her. "Go to the bank." She grabbed her coat and walked right out the door. If you think abandoning someone in their darkest hour is ever acceptable, you need to hear this. Because what happens next will make you question everything you know about loyalty. The bank did not seem like a regular bank. It felt more like a vault where secrets were stored. Maya walked across the huge lobby, past tall marble pillars and chandeliers that seemed way too fancy for a place that dealt with regular people's money. The heels of her sneakers squeaked on the glossy, mirror-like floor. She felt completely out of her element, as if she were underdressed and not ready for what was about to happen. A woman in a sharp, expensive suit came up to her before she even reached the information counter. "Miss Richardson?" Maya froze. "Yes? We have been expecting you. Please follow me." She had not called ahead or made an appointment, but they were somehow waiting for her. The woman led her past the main tellers, through a heavy, secure door that needed a special card to open, and down a hallway that was strangely silent. They went into a private room with no windows. A man who looked to be in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes, stood up when she entered. He had a calm presence about him, suggesting he had seen it all. "Miss Richardson," he said softly, "my name is Victor Kane. I was your father's account manager for 32 years. I am so very sorry for your loss." She could only nod, a lump growing in her throat. "He told me to come here, right before she could not make herself finish the sentence. Victor pointed to a chair. "He knew you would. He made some very specific arrangements." He then set a small metal box on the table between them. The numbers 1, 2, 4, 7 were carved into the surface. "This box needs 2 keys to open," Victor explained, taking one from his suit jacket pocket. "Yours should have been with his personal effects." Maya dug into her purse and took out the large envelope from the hospital. Inside was her father's wedding ring, his old watch, and a small brass key that had seemed meaningless until now. She handed it to Victor. He slid both keys into their locks and turned them together. There was a solid click. Victor lifted the box's lid, then stepped back. "I will give you some privacy. Please take as much time as you need." He quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. Maya just stared at the open box. On top was a stack of documents held together with a black binder clip, and there was a sealed envelope with her name in her father's familiar handwriting, but something underneath it all made her breath catch. It was a set of old photos. One showed her dad, about 25 years old, standing proudly before a huge mansion. He wore a suit that was far richer than anything he had ever owned. He was with a group of people who looked like they ran the world. She turned to the next piece, a yellowed but readable newspaper clipping. The headline announced, "Hartwell heir vanishes after family dispute." She looked at the date, from 34 years ago. The name below the headline read, James Hartwell III. She glanced back at the photo. It was without a doubt her father, but that was not his name. Her hand started to tremble as she reached for the documents. The first was a legal trust, established 28 years ago and updated just 3 weeks before her father passed away. The beneficiary was Maya Richardson. The person in charge was Victor Kane. She glanced over legal jargon that was over her head. She noted words like irrevocable and protected interest, plus something called a spousal exclusion clause. Then, her gaze fell upon a number at the bottom of the 3rd page. She read it once, then again, and a 3rd time because it felt impossible. Her father, the man who scrubbed floors for 35 years, had left her a sum that made no sense at all. It was not a home or a bank account. It was an empire. With shaking hands, she opened the envelope. The letter inside was on simple paper with no letterhead, just her father's neat handwriting, slanted a little to the right like it always was when he took his time. "Baby girl, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I am so sorry I could not tell you this myself. But some truths are easier to handle once you have lived a little and can understand why they matter. My name was not always James Richardson. I was born James Hartwell III, the heir to a family that prized its name over its own people and power over character. My father built an empire, my grandfather expanded it, and I was expected to continue the tradition. There were no questions, no coloring outside the lines, and no personal choices. Then, when I was 26 years old, I met your mother. She was an employee at a small bookstore near the campus. She always had her hair in a single braid and would read poetry during her lunch break. She brought a joy to my life I never realized was missing. She did not care about my family name or the money. She only cared about who I was when no one was watching. I wanted to marry her, but my family said no. It was not that she was not good enough for them. It was because she was not part of their grand design. They wanted marriages that were more like corporate mergers, arrangements that looked good on financial reports. So, they gave me an ultimatum: the family fortune or the life I truly wanted. I chose her, and they made sure I would regret it. Maya had to pause her reading to wipe away tears before she could go on. They cut me off without a penny, publicly disowned me, and erased me from the family history as though I never existed. I changed my name and took jobs that did not require a background check. I began a new life with only the woman I adored and a belief that a good life comes from meaning, not from money. Your mother and I had 6 amazing years together before she died giving birth to you. I promise you, those 6 years were the wealthiest of my life. But this is the secret my family never discovered. The one thing I handled before I walked away. I did not just leave the fortune behind. I took it apart and rebuilt it. I locked it away behind legal walls so thick their army of lawyers could not break through. I gave control to a person I trusted with my life, and then I waited. I did this not for revenge, but because I suspected that someday you might need it. The money grew silently, managed by people who knew that real wealth is not about spending money. It is about being secure. It is about having choices. This gives you the ability to protect you from the kind of people I ran from, the ones who only value you when you are useful to them. I wanted you to grow up away from that world. I needed you to find out who you were before you found out what you had, to love for the right reasons, and to build your character in private. And now that you know, there's one more thing you need to understand. This is not meant to change you. It is meant to give you the freedom to be exactly who you are, without apologies, without fear, and without needing anyone's permission. Maya set the letter down. Her father was not escaping his wealth. He was protecting her from it until the exact moment she needed it most. The rest of the papers explained it all. In impersonal but exact language, there was an irrevocable trust agreement. It was established 6 months after her father took on his new identity. The trust was reviewed every 5 years, with the final change made 3 weeks before his death, just after he learned his time was limited. Maya carefully read the document, forcing herself to understand. This trust was not just money in a bank. It was a financial fortress, built with legal defenses and a long-term plan. Every asset was held inside legal structures, making them bulletproof against lawsuits, divorces, and creditors. Her name was on no public records. There was no paper trail, nothing that could ever lead back to her. Victor Kane, the man who gave her the box, was the trustee. He had full authority to grow and protect everything, but he could not spend one dime without her written consent after her 25th birthday. She had turned 25 only 3 months ago. A specific section caught her attention. It was a spousal exclusion clause. She read it again, trying to make sense of the legal language, and then she understood. If she got married, her husband would have 0 claim to her assets. The fortune belonged to her, and only her, totally untouchable forever. This was not a punishment or a lack of faith. in a future spouse. It was the ultimate form of protection. Her father had seen too many wealthy families torn apart by nasty divorces. He built a wall around her future that no one could breach. Not a gold digger, a smooth talker, or even a good husband in a failed marriage. A husband had no right to the original money, the income it made, or any piece of it. The trust was hers alone, created to be safe from anyone who might use her to get to it. Her father wrote it this way on purpose, because he foresaw, maybe not Marcus by name, but the eventual arrival of a man exactly like him, a man with a perfect smile and a pocket full of lies who would disappear the moment things got tough. The trust was designed to give her funds when she required them, but after she received that money, it became her own personal property, completely separate by state law. Marcus could not touch it, not in a divorce, not ever. Her father had seen it coming, maybe not the precise details, but he knew the type. He had spent 30 years making sure that no one could wound her the way his own family had wounded him. The document had other protections as well. There were clauses for her future children, safeguards in case she could not make her own decisions, and advice for how to use the fortune if she chose to. A particular phrase was written over and over again in the legal documents. The beneficiary maintains sole and absolute discretion. Simply put, it was hers, and she answered to no one about it. She could invest it or give it away, and nobody ever needed to know it was there. Her thoughts shifted to Marcus, to the divorce papers he said would be finished by the end of the week, and how he framed it all like he was doing her some big favor. He was absolutely clueless. He did not know who her father really was. He did not know the world she had just stepped into. He had no clue that the woman he was leaving now had more power than he could dream of in a lifetime. It was not a question of if she could get even, but if she should. Her father's words came back to her. True power is knowing you do not have to use it. But she was not so sure. Real power does not show off. It waits. So she would wait, too. She picked up the letter again. There were 2 more pages. Now that you know what you have, I need you to understand something much more important. Who you are. This money does not define you. That will never be you. You are crafted from different materials, from principles, from sacrifice, from watching what happens when someone values love over their birthright. I did not raise you with so little to punish you. I raised you with simplicity to teach you. You know what it means to earn something, to be patient, to go without. You make choices based on what matters, not what is easy. Most people born with wealth never learn that. They confuse their money with their character. They think wealth makes them strong, when all it does is make them loud. You are not one of them. You know strength is not what you have, it is what you do when you have nothing at all. And now that you have everything, I need you to remember that lesson, because this is what will happen. People will learn the truth eventually. Not right away, but one day they will. On that day, you will see who they really are. The people who stood by you when you had nothing will stand by you when you have everything. Those who left you will try to come back, and the ones who misjudged you will suddenly ask for a second chance. Let them. Not because you owe them a thing, but because watching people show their true colors is one of the most valuable lessons you will ever receive. Some will be angry you kept this a secret. Let them be angry. You do not owe anyone a look at your bank account or a reason for your privacy. Some will expect you to change, to become arrogant or careless. Prove them wrong by being exactly who you are. And then there are the others who will completely underestimate you. They will see your quiet nature and call it weakness. They will mistake your kindness for foolishness. They will assume that because you do not show off your wealth, you have none to show. Those are the people to watch. Not because they can hurt you financially, you are safe from that now, but because they will test your character. Your response to them will define the person you become. So this is my real inheritance to you. Patience, the strength to face hardship without reacting, to let people believe whatever they want while you build something they can never touch. To stay silent when everyone expects you to shout. Getting revenge is easy. Any fool with cash can ruin someone. But self-control, restraint, the choice not to use your power when you have it, that is rare. That is a true legacy. I love you, my baby girl. I always have, and I always will. You are going to be more than okay, Dad. Maya carefully folded the letter and slid it back into its envelope. She did not cry. She did not feel a surge of anger. She did not call Marcus to tell him he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. She simply sat there, hands on her stomach, feeling her daughter move inside her. And she realized her father was right. Some battles are not worth your energy. The people who deserve to lose are perfectly capable of destroying themselves. Victor returned 20 minutes later. He knocked softly on the door before entering, giving her a moment to compose herself. "Do you have any questions?" he asked gently. "Just one," Maya said. "How much is there?" He sat down across from her and held out a single sheet of paper, a summary that was simple to understand. It showed stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity, and overseas funds. The investments were spread across 12 different countries. The portfolio was built slowly over 34 years. It was managed quietly, never with showmanship, never with haste. The total value as of the last quarter was $5.2 billion. The number just sat on the page, a fact her brain struggled to process. She stared at it, read the figure again, and tried to connect it to the man who raised her in a small one-bedroom apartment, sending her to school with lunches and old paper bags. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That is a conservative number." Victor explained, "Your father stayed away from high-risk investments. He always preferred stability over quick profits. If he had been more aggressive, this figure could have been much higher." A wave of dizziness washed over her. "What am I supposed to do with it?" Victor gave a sad but warm smile. "Anything you want. That is the whole idea. You could live off the interest and never touch the principal. You could give it all to a good cause tomorrow. You could even pretend it does not exist. It is yours, with no strings attached. Does anyone else know? Only me, and now you. Your father was extremely private about it." She thought of Marcus. She thought of the divorce he was already starting, and how he offered to help with the baby like he was doing her some great kindness. He had absolutely no idea, and she was not going to be the one to tell him. "I want to keep this quiet," she said with determination. "Nobody else needs to know." Victor nodded. "That is a very wise decision. Whenever you are ready, we can set up distributions. Until then, everything will stay exactly as it is." She stood up, shook his hand, and walked out of the bank the same way she came in, alone, grieving, and unsure. But she was fundamentally different, because she knew something Marcus did not. The woman he had cast aside was not broken. She was fortified. And patience, just as her father taught her, was the most powerful weapon anyone could have. 3 weeks after that meeting, the courthouse photos went viral. Marcus and Isabel were married, quickly and very publicly, smiling like they had won the lottery. The comment section blew up almost immediately. "Wow, that was fast. Didn't his wife just lose her father?" Some people have absolutely no shame. Maya saw the pictures. She felt a sharp sting But she did not respond. She just went on with her life. She went to her doctor's appointments, set up the nursery, and read her father's letter over and over. She read it until every single word was committed to memory. When anyone asked how she was handling everything, Maya would offer a calm smile and give the same reply each time: "I'm fine." And the strangest part was, she meant it. It was not that the betrayal did not hurt. It was because she had learned a lesson that Marcus never would. True strength does not need to put on a show for everyone. It just waits for the right moment. Think about it. Real power stays quiet until it is truly needed. Most people feel they have to broadcast their influence the second they get it. But the ones who have actually earned it know better. Marcus moved fast. Their divorce was final in just 43 days. His new wedding took place only 12 days after that. Maya signed every paper without a single argument. She did not ask for alimony. She did not fight for assets they barely had. She took only what was hers by law, which was almost nothing, and let him walk away thinking he had handled it all so smoothly. He made one post about it, a carefully crafted statement about moving forward with grace and choosing his own happiness. The comments came pouring in, a mixture of support and disgust. "Good for you, man. Life is too short." "You seriously couldn't wait 6 months? Her father literally just died." This is exactly why people have lost faith in marriage. Isabel posted something too. It was a picture of her hand, showing off a big new ring. The caption said, "When you know, you just know." The internet definitely had opinions, and they were strong. Maya became the topic of stories people shared at dinner parties. The pregnant wife, whose husband left her, the woman who never said a word to defend herself, the one everyone was watching, just waiting for her to finally break. Her husband had left her right after her father's funeral. The story was sympathetic, tragic, and a little bit pathetic. She heard it all from others. Friends who did not know what to say, acquaintances who sent awkward texts, and total strangers online who argued about whether Marcus was a monster or just being honest with himself. She never corrected the stories, never tried to defend herself, and never explained that she was doing just fine. In fact, she was thriving. She simply put her head down and waited patiently. Her father had taught her a lesson most people never learn. Public opinion is a fleeting storm, but your character is the house you live in. And right then, Marcus was showing the entire world the kind of house he had built. She did not need to say a word. By the 7th month of her pregnancy, the noise had died down. People found new scandals and fresher gossip to talk about. Maya spent her days putting together nursery furniture, washing tiny baby clothes, and reading parenting books that filled her with both fear and hope. Victor called her once a week to check in and make sure she had everything she needed. She always said yes, even when the truth was much more complicated. She was not worried about money. Victor had arranged for a small monthly deposit that covered her rent, food, and doctor appointments without drawing any attention. What she struggled with was the weight of her own feelings. It was not because of Marcus, but because of his complete and total silence. Her father was gone, her husband was gone, and the only person who could have truly understood her journey was someone she could never meet. It was the version of her father who had faced a similar impossible choice 30 years earlier. Then, on a Tuesday in late September, something unexpected arrived in her mailbox. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting and no return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was an invitation. It read, "You are cordially invited to the inaugural event of the Richardson Hartwell Foundation." Her breath caught in her throat. She read the words again. Richardson Hartwell was her father's real name, which meant it was her name too. The event was scheduled for October 14th. It was a formal gala, at a private location with a very limited guest list. At the very bottom, in smaller letters, it said, "Your presence is requested as the Foundation's primary guest of honor." She had no idea what any of this meant. Victor had never said anything about a foundation. Her father's letter had not mentioned one either. She pulled out her phone and called Victor. He answered on the second ring. "You received the invitation," he said, stating it as a fact rather than asking a question. "What is all of this?" "It is your father's final project. He spent 2 years planning it before he got sick. I have been carrying out his vision since he passed. It is time? Time for what?" Victor paused for a moment before answering softly, "It is time for everyone to finally learn who you really are." Her heart started to pound. "I never agreed to this. You do not have to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. But the event is happening, and the guest list is already set." "Who is on the list?" There was another short silence. "Everyone who matters, and that includes Marcus." The official announcement came out 3 days later. A clean and professional press release was sent to all the local news stations and charitable organizations across the state. The Richardson Hartwell Foundation would launch with a $50 million endowment to support educational access, career development, and single-parent families. The newly established foundation planned to hold its first fundraising gala the following month. The organization was created to honor the legacy of James Richardson, who spent more than 3 decades serving his community in quiet but meaningful ways. The article included a photograph of her father, not in his janitor's uniform, but an old one of him in a suit, looking like he belonged in a corporate boardroom. People who knew him were baffled. "Wait, is that the custodian from the elementary school? I never knew he had money. Who is funding all of this?" The press release did not say. It named Victor Kane as the executive director and listed a board of advisors with names that no one in town had ever heard of. It also referred to an anonymous, founding donor whose incredible generosity had made the entire thing possible. The community's response was guarded, a mixture of intrigue and suspicion. $50 million does not just materialize out of thin air, and James Richardson, the man who mopped floors and fixed broken pipes, did not seem like the type to have that kind of wealth. Rumors started to fly. Some thought it was an elaborate scam. Others were convinced a celebrity was using her father's name for a publicity stunt. A few even assumed Maya had won a huge divorce settlement and was trying to repair her reputation. No one could have guessed the real story, because the truth was just too strange to be believed. Maya watched it all from a distance. She made no statements, offered no explanations, and stayed out of the gossip. Victor was managing everything. He handled the press, planned the event, and organized the vendors. The only thing she was required to do was show up. But that guest list weighed on her mind. Victor had sent it in a secure email. There were 200 names, including donors, community leaders, local politicians, and people her father had known through his work. And there, near the very bottom of the list, was the name Marcus Chun, plus one guest. Her stomach twisted into a knot. "Why is he invited?" she asked Victor over the phone. "Your father specifically asked for him to be there." "What?" "He left detailed instructions, including the exact guest list. Marcus was on it." "That makes no sense." "Dad passed away before Marcus even left me." "Your father was a very insightful man," Victor said, choosing his words with care. "He had a way of seeing things long before they happened." She let that thought settle in, trying to wrap her head around it. Her father had known, maybe not the details, but he knew this was a possibility, and he had made sure Marcus would be in the room on the night the truth came out. It was not for revenge. It was for a lesson. I do not know if I can do this, Maya admitted. You do not have to, Victor reassured her. But if you do not go, you will wonder for the rest of your life what could have been. She recalled her father's letter, his advice to be patient and let people reveal who they truly are. He will bring Isabel, she said softly. Probably, and everyone will gossip. They're already gossiping. She exhaled slowly, feeling the baby stir as she rested a hand on her belly. Okay, she finally said. I will be there. Good, Victor replied, because this night is about you, not him. It is time everyone understood that. The venue was stunning, an old estate, converted into an event hall. Chandeliers, like frozen waterfalls, hung from above. The polished floors were a perfect mirror of the ceiling. The table linens probably cost more than a month of rent. Maya arrived 30 minutes early. Victor met her at a private entrance, glanced at her, and smiled. You look absolutely perfect, he said. She had chosen her outfit with great care, an emerald green dress with a high waist. It was designed to flatter her advanced pregnancy. Her hair was pulled back simply. She wore minimal jewelry, aside from one significant item, a diamond necklace from the safety deposit box. It was classic, elegant, and simple, unless you recognized its value. She had no idea what it was worth, only that it belonged to her grandmother, the woman her father's family had disowned along with him. Wearing it felt right. How are you feeling? Victor asked. I am terrified, she confessed. Good, that means you are focused. The guests started to arrive. Maya watched from a private room with a one-way window looking out over the ballroom. She recognized faces from her father's church, his old work friends, and neighbors. And then she spotted Marcus. He came in with Isabel on his arm. Isabel was in a striking red dress, the type of woman who commands a room's attention. Marcus, however, seemed tense, not from the formal setting. He looked uneasy because he did not know why he was invited. His eyes scanned the room for Maya, but he likely could not see her. Isabel guided him toward the bar. They got drinks and made small talk with strangers, pretending to be a happy, successful pair. Maya could feel her own heart pounding in her throat. Victor suddenly materialized beside her. You do not need to go out there yet. We can wait for the program to begin. No, Maya replied quietly. I want to walk in like everyone else. Are you certain? She nodded. Her father had taught her that confidence is not about feeling prepared. It is about taking the next step, even when you are not. She left the room, went down a long corridor, and stopped at the ballroom entrance. She inhaled deeply, then stepped inside. The room did not go quiet immediately, but the entire mood changed. The buzz of conversation faded away. Sentences were left unfinished. Every head turned, not for a dramatic entrance, but because she was very pregnant and very much alone. She saw the realization spread across the crowd. Marcus saw her. His face went blank, then confused, and finally, his expression curdled into something like panic. Isabel leaned in and whispered to him. He did not reply, just kept staring. Maya never even glanced at him. She walked with quiet purpose to a reserved table near the front, sat down gently, and folded her hands in her lap. Just breathe. A woman she did not recognize approached her. She had a kind, older face. You must be Maya, she said gently. I am. Your father talked about you constantly. I am so sorry for your loss. Thank you. The woman smiled warmly. He would be so proud of you tonight. A knot formed in Maya's throat. She could only offer a slight nod. Others came to her, offering their sympathies and sharing fond memories of her dad. All the while, Marcus remained frozen across the room as a thought began to dawn on him. This was not just some random charity gala. This was her event, and he had no idea what was coming. The lights in the hall started to dim. A microphone stand was placed on the small stage. Victor was the first to speak. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you all for being here. Tonight is about more than launching a foundation. It is about honoring a man who lived his values daily, especially when no one was watching." He talked about her father's integrity, his gentle kindness, and his dependability. People around the room nodded, some dabbing their eyes. Then Victor's voice shifted. "What most of you do not know is that James Richardson made an incredibly hard choice. 34 years ago, he left behind a life of extraordinary wealth and privilege because he would not give up on love. He changed his name, started over, and built a life founded on his own character, not his inheritance." Murmurs of confusion spread through the guests. Marcus leaned forward, suddenly listening with great intensity. "That choice cost him everything his family valued," Victor continued, "but it gave him something far greater, his integrity, and a daughter who inherited his principles, not his money." Victor paused to let that sink in. "The Richardson Hartwell Foundation is here because James never forgot his roots, and because he spent 30 years making sure his daughter could build something meaningful without the burden of expectations or entitlement." He gestured to Maya. "It is my honor to introduce the founder of the foundation and its main benefactor, Maya Richardson." Polite applause filled the room, then it grew into a strong ovation. Maya rose and walked to the stage, each step feeling heavy. She saw Marcus's face transform as he put it all together. His confusion melted into comprehension, and that comprehension twisted into pure horror. He was finally seeing the whole picture. Richardson Hartwell was her father's true name. The $50 million endowment, the foundation, it was all hers. Isabel looked at him, completely baffled by his reaction. He offered no answers. He just stared as the woman he abandoned, 6 months pregnant and grieving, a woman he thought was defeated, stood on a stage before 200 people who now understood what he never did. She was not a victim. She was a legacy. Maya reached the microphone and adjusted it slightly. The entire hall became completely still. She did not look at Marcus, but at the faces of those who loved her father. Then she began to speak. Her voice was steady, not loud or theatrical, just perfectly clear. "My father taught me that our most important decisions are the ones no one ever sees." She paused. "He taught me love is not about convenience. It is about showing up for people when it is hard, when no one is watching, and when you have every reason to walk away." A few people nodded. "He also taught me that wealth without character is just noise, that true power is not what you have, but what you choose to do with it when no one is forcing your hand." She glanced at her notes and took a breath. "Most of you knew my father as a janitor, a maintenance worker, someone who was always early, stayed late, and never wanted any credit." She looked up at them. "What you did not know is that he was born into one of the wealthiest families on the East Coast. He was meant to inherit a fortune, but he gave it up when his wealthy family told him love was worthless." A quiet shock filled the room. Her voice was steady as she continued. "He proved them all wrong. He lived for 34 years as a testament that a good life is measured by character, not by bank accounts. When he passed, he left me something far greater than riches." She paused, letting the silence settle. "He left me a choice." The room was completely silent. I could have hidden all of this. I could have taken the life he built for me and simply vanished. No one would have ever found out. She met the crowd's gaze, but my father did not conceal his wealth out of shame. He hid it so I would learn who I was before I learned what I had. She let the weight of that sink in. Now that I understand both, I am choosing his path. I am going to create something that lasts. I will lift up people who have been ignored. I will be a lifeline for families who have none. Victor stepped forward, placing a document on the lectern beside her. The Richardson Hartwell Foundation has been formed, launching with an initial endowment of $50 million. Its structure is designed to create a lasting, generational legacy. A wave of applause started to swell. But she held up a hand. That $50 million is less than 1% of the trust my father created for me. The applause died instantly. You could see people trying to do the math in their heads. The last quarterly valuation was $5.2 billion. A new silence fell over the room, not of shock, but of deep understanding. She was not smiling. She was simply stating a fact. I am not telling you this to show off. I am telling you this so you understand that my father raised me to be responsible, not to be rich. And I intend to be exactly that. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause that erupted was a roar. People rose to their feet, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Maya walked from the stage with quiet dignity and returned to her table. Across the room, Marcus was frozen. The color had drained from his face, his hands clenching the table's edge. Isabel was trying to speak to him, but he couldn't hear her. He was calculating. The woman he had abandoned, believing she had nothing, now controlled more wealth than he could earn in 10 lifetimes. He had thrown it all away, not because she wasn't good enough, but because he never cared enough to ask who she truly was. If you have ever dismissed someone for being unassuming, let this moment sink in. Subscribe if you still believe in loyalty, because this story is far from over. Marcus tried to leave the moment Maya left the stage. He stood, took Isabel's hand, and muttered an excuse about needing air. But Victor was a step ahead. He did not block the way. He simply stood by the exit, a calm, knowing smile on his face that communicated everything. Marcus stopped in his tracks. Isabel looked bewildered. What is happening? He could not answer. What could he say? That the woman he had divorced just 8 weeks ago, the woman he left while she was pregnant and grieving, was one of the wealthiest individuals in the state? That he had walked away from billions because he was too impatient to endure a difficult time? That every decision he had made for 6 months was based on a lie about who held the real power? Isabel tugged his arm. Marcus, talk to me. He sank back into his chair, feeling utterly numb, as the room buzzed with excitement about the foundation, about Maya, and about her father's incredible legacy. Someone nearby whispered, "Can you imagine giving up that kind of money just to marry the person you love? That is almost unheard of." Another person replied, "And to raise a daughter who is so down to earth? That is even more impressive." Marcus heard every word, each one a painful reminder of his own failure. He glanced at Maya, who was now surrounded by well-wishers, thanking her and offering support. She looked tired but resolute. She never once looked in his direction, not out of spite, but because he was no longer significant. It finally clicked for Isabel. "Wait," she said slowly, "that is your ex-wife?" He just nodded. "The one you said had nothing?" He remained silent. She pulled her hand back from his. "Marcus, how much did you know about this?" "Nothing," he said quietly. "I knew nothing. You never asked?" He looked up and saw her expression shift. He could see her reevaluating everything. She was not angry. She was assessing him, wondering if she had made a catastrophic error by linking her future to a man who could misread a situation so completely. He saw it, he felt it, and he knew this must be what Maya experienced. He felt the cold humiliation of having his worth recalculated by someone he trusted. "I have to talk to her," he said suddenly. "Do not," Isabel warned. "I have to, Marcus. Just let it be." But he was already moving through the crowd toward Maya. Victor intercepted him with practiced ease, his tone polite but firm. "She is unavailable right now. I just need 5 minutes." She is not interested. Marcus's jaw tightened. You cannot speak for her. I do not need to. She asked me to make it clear that there is nothing left to say. The words landed like a heavy door slamming shut. It was over. Marcus stood there, useless. The woman he had so profoundly underestimated continued her conversations with people who truly mattered. He had wanted closure, an explanation, maybe even a chance to apologize. But Maya owed him nothing, and she gave him nothing. 10 minutes later, she slipped out through a side door without any fanfare. She was simply gone. Marcus watched her go, and for the first time, he understood what it felt like to be completely irrelevant. Naomi Grace Richardson was born on a Thursday, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and her grandfather's eyes. Maya held her for the first time in the quiet of a hospital room. There was no husband in the hall, no family in the waiting area. There was only Victor, who had insisted on being there, and a kind nurse named Petra. Petra stayed well past the end of her shift, believing no one should have to welcome a new life alone. She is just perfect, Petra whispered. Maya could only nod, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her father should have been here to hold his granddaughter, to see the beautiful future he had worked so hard to secure. The baby's weight felt like a fulfilled promise from a man who would never see it. Maya looked at Naomi's face. A perfect, tiny canvas of what could be. My sweet girl, I will always keep you safe, she whispered. But with her father gone, Maya knew she would have to be strong enough for them both. She studied every detail of Naomi, tracing her tiny fingers. Your grandfather loved you before you were even a thought, she told the baby. He made sure your life would be safe and full of choices. Naomi gave a small yawn, impossibly small but completely whole. Victor came closer, his face soft with warmth as he looked at the baby. James would have been so proud, he said softly. You have done a wonderful thing, Maya. She took a long, slow breath. I feel like all I did was survive. He smiled. That is more than most can say. She spent the next 2 days in the hospital, learning the rhythm of feedings and the art of functioning on 2 hours of sleep. A bouquet of flowers arrived from Marcus. They were generic, with a simple card that read, "Congratulations, wishing you both well." She put them in the trash can without a second thought. It was not a gesture of anger, but of acceptance. They were meaningless. They came from a man who had already chosen to be a stranger. Around that time, Isabel posted a new photo online. It showed her and Marcus at a sunny outdoor cafe, both smiling for the camera. The caption said, "Choosing joy every day." Maya did not bother reading the comments. Her attention was on more important matters. When she finally brought Naomi home, the apartment felt different. The small space felt quieter, but it was filled with a new kind of life. She put the bassinet beside her bed. Above it, she hung the mobile her father had bought months before he got sick. He had carved the tiny wooden animals himself during long, sleepless nights. She found them in his apartment after he was gone, carefully wrapped with a small note that said, "For when she arrives." Now those little animals turned gently over his granddaughter, making soft, dancing shadows on the wall. Maya sat in the rocking chair, holding Naomi close. She began to sing a lullaby her father used to sing to her when she was a child who could not sleep. And for the first time since he had died, a sense of peace settled over her. The grief was still there, but she was finally understanding the lesson he wanted her to learn. Legacy is not what you leave for people. It is the people you raise to carry on. The foundation expanded at a rate that stunned everyone. In just 6 months, it provided scholarships for 40 students. It also launched a new job training center and teamed up with 3 local nonprofits. These organizations gave emergency assistance to single parents facing eviction or buried under medical bills. Maya managed everything quietly. There were no press conferences, no big ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and she only spoke in public when it was absolutely necessary. She would show up, make the critical decisions, sign the checks that changed lives, and then go home to her daughter. People started to recognize her, not as a celebrity, but as someone making a genuine impact. A woman in her late 30s approached her at the grocery store one day. Her eyes welled up with tears. "You paid for my son's tuition," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know if you remember him, but he is the first person in our whole family to ever go to college. This is all because of you." Maya gave her a warm smile. "It is because of your son. He is the one who did the work." "No," the woman insisted, shaking her head. "It is because someone believed he was worth the chance, thank you." Moments like these happened more and more often. She got letters, emails, and had random encounters with people whose entire lives were transformed because the foundation was there for them. Maya kept every single letter. She read them on difficult days whenever she began to wonder if her efforts truly made a difference. They did matter. It was never about the money itself, but about the opportunities that money created. Her father had been right. Wealth without a purpose is just empty noise. But wealth used with intention is how you build a legacy. By the time Naomi had her first birthday, the foundation was serving 3 different counties. Victor managed the daily operations while Maya guided the long-term vision. After some time, people stopped asking where the funding came from. They were simply glad it was there when they needed it. Marcus would hear about Maya's work occasionally through mutual friends or on social media. Her name would pop up in circles that made him feel uncomfortable. He tried to make a donation once by sending a check for $5,000. He mailed it directly to the foundation's office. Victor sent it right back. There was no explanation, just the uncashed check and a note with a single word written on it: declined. Marcus never tried to donate again. Isabel left him just 14 months after the gala. Her departure was not dramatic. It was practical. She had finally realized what Maya had known all along. Marcus was the kind of man who would trade up for something he thought was better, then trade down the moment he realized his mistake. She had no desire to be the next person he completely misjudged. Their divorce was handled quickly and without any fanfare. Hardly anyone noticed, because by then, Marcus had become exactly what Maya predicted he would be: irrelevant. She had not destroyed him. She had simply built a new world without him. In doing so, she had turned him into a minor footnote in a story that was never really about him. Marcus saw Naomi only once, and it was entirely by accident. He was walking through a park near his office when he saw them. Maya was pushing a stroller, and Naomi, who was about 18 months old, was pointing at birds and chattering excitedly. Maya looked different. She seemed stronger and more at peace with herself than she ever had been during their marriage. For a second, he thought about walking over to them, but then he saw Victor was there too. Victor was walking right beside them, laughing at something Naomi said. He was present in a way Marcus never had been, so he stayed back and watched them from afar. Naomi had her mother's smile and her grandfather's eyes. She looked healthy, happy, and incredibly loved. A strange feeling twisted in Marcus's gut. It was not quite jealousy, it was a painful recognition. He realized he had been given the opportunity to be part of that life. He could have been the man pushing that stroller, the one hearing his daughter's laugh. He could have built something real, but he had chosen a different way. It was not because Maya was not enough for him, but because he had told himself she was too much work. He had wanted a life that was easy and uncomplicated. What he ended up with was a life that was hollow. Isabel was gone. His professional reputation had taken one quiet hit after another. He did not grasp the full damage until people just stopped returning his calls. The life he thought he was upgrading to felt emptier every year. In that same time, Maya had built something undeniable. She did not do it with fanfare or revenge. She did it with quiet, steady determination. The foundation kept growing. Her name started appearing in contexts that mattered, like on education panels and community planning boards. She never sought recognition, but it found her anyway. People will always respect true competence, and she had proven hers over and over. Marcus, in sharp contrast, was stalled. His career had hit a dead end. All of his relationships were superficial. His life felt more like a performance he was putting on than something he was actually living. Sometimes he thought about contacting her, maybe to apologize or try to explain. But what could he possibly say? I am sorry I left when things got hard. I am sorry I failed to see your real worth. I am sorry I was too arrogant to ask. None of it would change a single thing. Maya had moved on from him completely. He was left alone with a hard lesson that came far too late to be useful. Years passed. Naomi started kindergarten, and the foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary. Maya's name finally appeared in a business journal. The profile was titled, "The Philanthropist You Have Never Heard of." The article detailed her father's story, the foundation, and all the incredible work it was doing. It mentioned Marcus just one time, only in passing. It said Richardson was previously married, but has been a single mother since her daughter's birth, choosing to focus on family and philanthropy. It was a single sentence that reduced him to a minor detail. He read it twice and felt a sharp pain. The words were not cruel, but they were entirely accurate. He had been demoted to a detail, a short phase in her life. He was just a person who was there for a little while and then gone before anything important happened. The most painful part was that he knew he deserved it. Maya stood in her father's old apartment one last time before the lease officially ran out. 6 years had gone by since his death. 6 years of building and growing. She was learning who she was when no one else was there to define her. Naomi was spending the afternoon with Victor, which gave Maya the quiet space she needed to close this final chapter on her own. She walked through the rooms, which seemed smaller than she remembered. She ran her hand along the kitchen counter where her father had cooked thousands of meals. She sat on the couch, where he had slept for 16 years, just so she could have the bedroom. The apartment was now totally empty. The furniture had been given away, and his things had been sorted. All that remained were the memories and one last envelope she had saved. It was the one Victor had held for her until he knew she was ready. She opened it carefully. Baby girl, if you are reading this, it means that enough time has passed for you to finally understand what I need to tell you. Loss is not a punishment. Loss is permission. It is permission to discover who you are when no one is left to put their expectations on you. It is permission to build something that reflects your own values. It is permission to walk away from anyone who cannot see your worth, not because you are full of anger, but because you are too busy building something better. Over these years, you have shown something that I have known all along. Character is not about what you possess. It is about what you choose to do when you have everything to lose. Some people will tell you that you were lucky, that you inherited wealth and opportunity. Let them talk. What they will never understand is that wealth without wisdom is just a pile of money. And you, my dear, had wisdom long before you had any resources. I am so proud of you, not because you are successful, but because you have always been kind. You have stayed grounded, and you have always been yourself. That is your real inheritance. All my love, Dad. She carefully folded the letter, slipped it back in its envelope, and wiped the tears from her eyes. Then she locked the door to the apartment one last time. As she stepped into the brilliant afternoon light, her daughter Naomi was already there, waiting at Victor's office. The little girl immediately ran to her. "Mama," she cried. Maya pulled her daughter into a big hug, holding on to her for a long moment. "Did you have a fun day? We got ice cream." "Of course you did," Maya said, glancing at Victor with a smile. He simply shrugged, a playful look on his face. "Grandpa Perks," he explained. The three of them headed to the car, Naomi chattering away excitedly about her day, while Victor asked silly questions that sent her into fits of giggles. While Maya fastened her daughter into the car seat, she gazed at the little girl who would only know her grandfather through stories. But Maya knew she would grow up with his spirit. And right then, she experienced a feeling she had not known for a very long time. It was an overwhelming sense of thankfulness, not for any material thing, but for the person she could finally be. It turned out her father had been right about everything. For Maya, losing him was not an ending, but a new start. It was her chance to finally become the person she was meant to be, without excuses or needing anyone else's permission. And she knew she had made the right choice. If this story made you think about loyalty, patience, or what it means to be responsible, then subscribing shows you want stories that help you grow, not just pass the time. Do not just be a viewer. Learn something new with us. Hey everyone, a huge thank you for watching all the way to the end. We really value your support. If you like this story, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment for us below. We always enjoy reading your thoughts. And we have great news. The journey does not have to stop now. Just click on the video you see right on the screen to dive into another fantastic story. Believe us, you will be glad you did. Thank you again for being such an amazing part of our circle. Until next time, stay curious and always keep exploring the stories that speak to you. This content was thoughtfully researched, created, and personally edited by our team to bring you meaningful tales with important life lessons. Each story is designed to entertain, lift you up, and give you strength. We are firm believers that powerful stories can transform lives, and we are dedicated to creating content that truly makes a difference. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community